The restaurant buzzed with midweek energy, dim lights casting golden pools on linen-covered tables, soft jazz floating in the air like a secret between strangers. Waiters weaved through the maze of chairs, balancing trays of seared scallops and high-end cocktails. It was the kind of place people came to be seen, to close deals, to impress dates with wine lists longer than small-town phone books. Elena Hart sat across from Brian Whitmore, pretending to be engaged. She was good at that, masking boredom behind polite smiles, letting her gaze drift just far enough past her date's shoulders so it looked like attentiveness. Brian hadn't noticed. He was too busy listening to his own voice. I mean, it's wild how people don't understand how equity derivatives function. I had this guy in my office last week, an analyst, asking me about volatility curves like he didn't Google it first. He laughed, alone, but that's finance now. Everyone wants the corner office, no one wants to read. Elena nodded, sipping her still full wine glass. He hadn't asked her a single question in the past 30 minutes. Not that she expected him to. Her assistant had warned her, he's connected, good on paper, just talkative. That was code for unbearable, apparently. Anyway, Brian continued, swirling his Cabernet with too much flair. I told him straight, get your head in the game or get out. I don't have time to babysit interns. You know how it is. She arched an eyebrow. You fire interns often. He smirked. I fire anyone who slows me down. Efficiency is everything. Charming, she thought, glancing down at her phone for the time. Still only 8:12 p.m. Too early to fake an emergency, too late to salvage the night. The steak she'd barely touched was already cold. You haven't told me much about what you do, Brian said finally, as if remembering she was a participant in the conversation. I run a company, she replied simply. Oh yeah, he leaned back in his chair. Startup, marketing, something like that, niece. Good for you, he said, with the same patronizing tone one might use on a kid who made their bed. I love women who work. Shows hustle. She blinked. Thanks, he grinned. Still, I hope you're not one of those boss babes who thinks she doesn't need a man. Elena smiled thinly, ready to end the evening. She was reaching for her clutch when a voice interrupted, quiet but firm. You okay, ma'am? She turned and saw a man standing just a few feet away. He wore a well-worn flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, faded jeans, and boots that had seen years of wear. His hair was dark and tousled, his jawline shadowed with stubble. He looked a bit out of place in the upscale restaurant, but not uncomfortable. Next to him stood a little girl in a navy hoodie, holding a stuffed rabbit by one floppy ear. Her wide eyes peeked up at Elena with innocent curiosity. I'm sorry, Elena asked, caught off guard. I was just over there. The man nodded toward the corner table by the window, where a single plate now sat abandoned, and I saw him, waving his fork around. Looked like you might need an out. Brian scoffed. Excuse me, you know her. The man's gaze flicked to him, calm and steady. Nope. Then maybe mind your business. Elena stood slowly, collecting her coat. Actually, I'd like to leave. Brian's jaw dropped slightly. You're kidding, right? Because this guy in a lumberjack shirt decided to play hero. She ignored him, turned to the man. Thank you, I'll take you up on the walk. The man blinked, clearly surprised. Sure, of course. Brian threw his napkin down. Unbelievable. Elena didn't respond. She walked past him, the stranger gently holding the door open for her as she stepped out into the crisp October night. The air outside was sharp and cool, the kind of New York evening that smelled like dry leaves and car exhaust. Traffic hummed in the background, and the city lights glinted off the wet pavement like stars in a puddle. Thank you, she said as they began walking. No problem, he replied, hands in his pockets, his daughter keeping pace beside him, tiny sneakers slapping the sidewalk. I wasn't sure if I should say something, but figured I'd risk looking like a weirdo if it helped. I've had worse things said to me by richer men, she said dryly. He glanced at her, then smiled. Yeah, he seemed like a piece of work. You're being generous. She looked down at the little girl, who was humming quietly to herself, her bunny bouncing at her side. She's adorable, Elena said. Thanks. This is Lucy. Lucy looked up. Hi. Elena bent slightly, smiling. Hi, Lucy. I'm Elena. Nice name, the girl said, then resumed her humming. Elena straightened, her amusement blooming into something warmer. The man offered a hand. I'm Jack. Elena, she replied again, shaking it. Neither of them mentioned last names. Neither of them needed to. They kept walking, slowly, beneath the glow of the streetlights. They walked without any real direction, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm beneath the glow of amber street lamps. The city moved around them, cars slid by in hissing waves, a cyclist weaved through the traffic, and the distant wail of a siren cut through the night air, but none of it reached the small world forming quietly between them. Elena tucked her hands into the pockets of her coat, the chill of the evening brushing her cheeks and catching in her hair. She glanced sideways at Jack. His shoulders were broad, his walk relaxed, but there was something careful about him. Like he'd learned to stay alert, to measure the space around him, to carry more than just his own weight. Lucy, still in his arms, leaned her head against his shoulder. Her rabbit dangled sleepily from one hand. "She's out cold," Jack murmured, smiling faintly. "She always crashes early when she's had a good day." Elena smiled. "What qualifies as a good day?" "Today, pancakes for dinner and finding a sticker on the sidewalk," he said, shifting Lucy gently. "She thinks it's treasure. We're building a treasure book at home. Scrap paper, glitter, crayon drawings, whatever she finds important." "I love that," Elena said, her voice soft. "That's kind of beautiful." Jack shrugged. "It's just our thing. Keeps her curious. And busy. You're doing a good job." He looked at her then, not with the polite nod he'd given her inside the restaurant, but with a steadier gaze. It wasn't flirty or fishing for anything, it was simply a man trying to figure out if someone meant what they said. "Thanks," he said after a beat. "Some days it feels like I am. Some days, less so." Elena nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." Jack chuckled. Come on, you're polished, sharp, you probably run something with, like, 30 employees under you." She smiled without answering, and instead asked, "What do you do?" "Carpentry, mostly, renovation work, kitchens, floors, a lot of patch-up stuff in older buildings. Flexible hours, which helps with Lucy." "That sounds honest." He raised an eyebrow. "It is. Tiring too. There's a kind of satisfaction, though, in fixing something that's broken. Doesn't happen much in life. But with wood and screws and time, you can usually make something work again." Her smile faltered just a little. "Wish more things were like that." They passed a closed flower shop. The petals of the bouquets inside had already started to droop behind the glass, but the place still smelled faintly of roses. Elena glanced at them, then back at Jack. "Ever think of doing something else?" she asked. "Sure," he said, "but this fits. Pays enough, keeps me moving. And Lucy's the main gig anyway. Everything else just has to orbit around that." She looked at him, the way his arm adjusted every few steps to keep Lucy secure, the way his eyes kept sweeping their surroundings, half focused on her, half on the path ahead. There was a quiet gravity about him. She envied that. "No one's ever walked me out of a bad date before," she said suddenly. He glanced over with a grin. "That a good thing or a bad thing?" "I'm still deciding," she said, laughing. "But I think it's a good thing." "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "I just got this weird gut feeling, you know. Like you were looking for an escape." "I was." Jack nodded. "Then I'm glad I spoke up." They stopped at a corner where the city thinned out a little, fewer taxis, less foot traffic, the sound of the street quieter. Elena looked around and realized she'd walked farther than she meant to. "I should probably call a car," she said, reaching for her phone. "Subway's faster from here," Jack said, gesturing toward the nearby station entrance. "Still pretty safe at this hour." She paused. "I usually don't take it. Too many creeps, too many cameras," she said without thinking. Then added quickly, "I mean, yeah, creeps too." Jack gave her a curious look but didn't press. He wasn't the type to dig where he wasn't invited. She looked at him, really looked, and saw no hint of calculation in his eyes. Just a tired man, carrying a sleeping child, who had offered kindness without asking for anything in return. He wasn't performing, and he had no idea who she was. No clue that the woman walking beside him had been on the cover of business magazines. That her last name held weight in boardrooms. That she owned 3 companies, not counting the one she silently ran behind the scenes. To him, she was just Elena. And for the first time in a long time, she liked how that felt. "Actually," she said, slipping her phone back into her coat pocket, "mind walking me a bit farther?" Jack smiled. "Sure. Just don't tell Lucy we're out past bedtime." From his shoulder, Lucy stirred and whispered groggily, "I won't if she gets ice cream." They both laughed, the moment light and effortless. And under the glow of the streetlights, something small and steady began to take root. Neither of them said it, but they both felt it, that quiet pull, that rare alignment of timing and chance. They kept walking. No last names, no questions, just a single dad, a stranger in designer boots, and a night that suddenly didn't feel so ordinary.